One thing I've learned, if you don't hold their feet to the fire, everybody gets burned.
Hold on. Before you start waving around that freedom of speech thing, when you're in a crowded movie theater and you scream fire, you better be able to smell smoke. You come on this radio show and you start saying incandescent things like that, you better have more behind you, pal, than just your thumb. I've been listening to talk radio for years, and one thing I just can't stand is when the host has to, push his way on the people, beat the callers into his way of thinking, extending his ego, or when the callers call in and say something so outrageous and the host lets it go unchallenged. The sign you're on the road to truth is the lack of contradiction. You want to find truth, you just don't simply believe somebody because of their authority or their degree, or you listen to what they say, you test it against reality, and you hold their feet to the fire.
All right, we're back and we're live. I'm doing this on my laptop in the house, so if you hear doggies and whatnot, that's what that's about. Also, I may get clicking noises and all that kind of stuff, so I apologize. I usually do this in the studio, and I have all kinds of gizmos and gadgets to help with the problems. So I put the link on Facebook and whatnot. So if you're tuning in live, fine. If you're listening later, that's fine too. It's a little early for the normal live show, but I haven't done a show in a few weeks, and so it's there is no normal live show really to speak of, at least in the last few weeks. So apologize about that, but hey, a lot of stuff's been going on. I mean, it's been really terrible for me. And it's like I feel like a baby, because here you talk about God and Jesus, and God will take care of you, and they'll only walk for the valley of the shadow of death and all this stuff. And it's true. I believe that. It is true. But when you're actually walking in the valley of the shadow of death, it's a little bit more scary. And even though it wasn't the shadow of death, and if someone were to look at what was driving me to my knees, you might look, it'll be all right, don't worry about it. So it's a reminder to all of us that everybody who is in their own crucible, it's quite real, and it's quite upsetting to the individual. So if somebody is listening live in Spreaker, if you could pop in the chat and let me know things are okay, or send me an email or something, because I can't tell like I normally do. This is how most people do it, and they seem to manage. So I can do it all these other ways, and which are more complicated, and yet something as simple as this, I might mess up. So I can't go into what's been going on, frankly, because the way the internet is, and social media and all this stuff, all it is a big spyglass for the powers that be. And it's not that there's some kind of big thing going on in the background. It's completely unrelated to most of the stuff I talk about. It's just all personal stuff. And I don't want to let that stuff go out. So I appreciate some of the prayers. I've asked for some prayers and so forth. And there is some light at the tunnel. I want to say that certain things have happened with amazing precision that if they had not have happened, it would have been catastrophic. So it's like, God says, hey, Jesus says in his teachings, God takes care of the birds in the air, and the lilies of the field are arrayed greater than Solomon and all that. So why wouldn't he want to take care of you? And it's not my worry that God will take care of me. I'm not worthy of any kind of care. I mean, I'm not saying in some dramatic fashion. It's just like it's like, why me? There's people who are being tortured and killed and all over this world, and it's like, why me? And that's why I love that song of Chris Christopherson. Why me, Lord? What have I ever done to deserve, what you have done and so forth like that? And that's where my worry comes from, is that not that God's going to go, like, well, you're not worth it. It's just I don't have let me go back. There's a saying, one of the Beatitudes is very, very close, important to me. It is, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The poor in spirit is someone who does not see the value of themselves so that they deserve or demand certain things. And that humility, which is a burden at times, is a saving grace, because the arrogance and the proud are laid waste before God. And the poor in spirit receive the kingdom of heaven. And so it's kind of like knowing that you're in that particular state of vulnerability is not pleasant to be in, but the risk of this haughty, proud arrogance is diminished. So that's one of the problems I have with the New Age and whatnot, is that they're all this I am God, I am, and everything. The secret where you make everything. It's all about I, the self, and that's the great flaw in that. Is that the role that Jesus did in his teachings, his sayings, and in his life and his actions were about working for others, and was humble, except for the only people he gave grief to, gave an earful to, was the humble or the proud and the haughty. So I'd rather be undervaluing myself than overvaluing myself. I'd rather be what would be the word? Not second guessing, but reevaluating and looking than to miss things. Well, on my website, one of the great sayings that I like from Socrates is, the greatest folly. Here, I'm reading it now. I went to the website now. If you were to click, I don't know if it's clicking. This is without the most reprehensible folly, the folly of thinking we know what we do not know. The unexamined life is not worth living. Those are my two favorites from Socrates. So this is the double-edged sword to that, is then you're constantly evaluating yourself. You're constantly, I guess you could use the word second guessing, and you're supposed to develop a situation where you could not overvaluate and not undervaluate. But I guess it's better to be on the underside than the over, I guess. So several of those, things that were lined up that would, crush, worked out. And the last couple pieces are falling into place. They're still unknowns. I still would like some prayers on that, but it's looking, it's looking better. The very show and everything about was at stake here, so the show would be the least of it. Nothing personal, but so that's why I've been around. I've posted stuff on Facebook, and some people might wonder why. But to me, it was taking a break from the pressures of what was going on. So, as I get closer to closure on this, I may revisit this and explain a few things, and I'm not doing this for any other reason other than the internet is a porous, wandering eye and ear to soak up everything, which could be sold then and used and what have you. And so I just don't like to put that stuff out there. I hope people's holidays at Christmas and whatnot was good. The New Year is coming. The time for New Year is always from reevaluating and looking forward and seeing what has happened in the year and what is looking forward in the political arena. As you who are regular listeners know, I'm not a big fan of Q or his plan. I would love it to happen, but to me there's nothing backing it up. And as the stakes get higher and higher, what I see happening is right now we are in a time of revelation. Things are coming out and being yelled from the mountaintops that were whispered in the inner rooms, to kind of paraphrase, bring in Jesus' words. And we see it all around us. We see the bolden brazenness with how they want to have abortion come up to and including and after birth, the Jeffrey Epstein being buried, the stories in that being buried and put away, the brazenness of the trans movement is now moving into, what are you calling it? Love, young love, and all this ridiculous stuff. It's becoming brazen and open. It is now like we're watching Sodom and Gomorrah with the internet. Sodom and Gomorrah and YouTube, with YouTube. And I think this is what this revelation part is to people have to make a public stand. And I don't necessarily mean public like on TV, but they have to come out into the space-time real world, and they'll either act and speak and act in that choice and move into the reality of that choice and become it. And then that will be the choice. And until, the end, there's always a chance for someone to repent, change, and so on. But as this is my personal view of this, as people make these choices and step out into reality, they are kind of cementing themselves into it. It's not that they can't change, it's that the probability from the momentum and energy they're going through is not going to happen. And people will step up. There'll be people who will maybe be in that background, and God will be speaking in their hearts, and instead of falling forward and out and in, they will become, whistleblowers, real ones, and will help to stop the stuff that's going on, or at least bring it to light. And they may end up dying in that process for coming forward, but that would be a good thing. They've changed their ways, they've come out into space-time and made a stand, and they were persecuted or killed for it. They have saved their souls. They followed the lead of God and repented, and joy is in that so-called demise. And this is what's happening. We see around us a lot of the people who are really standing up against the deep state and the satanic ways and all that stuff. They're being hounded and oppressed. So it's like Jesus says, when they persecute you, look up and joy. Your redemption is nigh. I mean, this is the kind of stuff we have to be telling ourselves, because, again, I'm not a Q fan here. I'm not, I think things are, going to get pretty crazy here, because the powers that be, the negative evilness, they're playing for keeps. There's no losing for them. There's no, okay, let's just call it even. It is win or lose. And if they lose, it's scorched earth loss. So this is why this is one thing I'm worried about with Trump. Is he really know what the stakes are? Because he might be thinking like, well, eventually at some point they'll back off because they'll see. No, there's no point. What would that scorched earth be as they start to lose? I don't know. I don't want to start speculating. I don't want to start throwing stuff out there. I don't want to talk about it because it's not pleasant. But this is how I view it. Evil will have to be crushed. It will not give up. And in the process, will the, to use a catchphrase, sons of righteousness, will they become, what they're fighting against? I mean, how do you fight against a psychopath without actually doing the deeds of a psychopath? It's tough times. This is why I'm, not only my personal stuff going on, it's just tough times out there. It looks to me, I'm guardedly optimistic that things are going forward. Perhaps people like Barr and others in there realize this is they're playing for keeps. They're really going to go after the bad guys. They're really going to go do these things. Excuse me. Personally, I think one of the reasons Barr got in there was going to try see if he could stuff the genie back in the bottle, and perhaps he's realizing he can't, and so they're going to have to take a side. And there is no midway. So, again, I'm guardedly optimistic. The shenanigans, what's going on with the impeachment and all that, to me, again, if it was a slam dunk for the darkness, it would have slam and dunked. And since it isn't, they have to, they're constantly audible. They're playing audibles on the field. And it's, when they do that, it, of course, belies their motives. So that people with eyes to see and ears to hear, or even people who are just kind of eyes to see, kind of hear, will start to see these things and go, wait, that's not right. Wait a minute. And so I'm guardedly optimistic as we're going forward with the knowledge, knowing that those individuals are playing for big time keeps and have no limits. There is no off limits. There's nothing, well, they'll never do that because, no, they'll do anything and everything. And if they do lose, scorched earth. But what I keep inside me for my own self in this is that if these are the latter days and these things do happen, Jesus in his talking about that no flesh would alive without those days were shortened. I think that was in Revelation, maybe. Or maybe it wasn't in Matthew. But people are thinking about the days being shortened, like the Earth's rotation is going to change and all that. No, I think what that means is that if the scenario was allowed to play out to its conclusion, no life would be left. In other words, I don't know, nuclear holocaust, whatever. So what God is going to do is step in and shorten that time frame. The days, look at the days as the timeline. He's going to shorten that timeline and step in and stop that from happening for mercy's sake. And that those individuals, it doesn't have to go all the way so that we will know it was going to go all the way. So it's kind of like the guy stealing. No, I'll tell you a story. There was a lady who worked at Fannie Mae Candies, and her husband was in a currency exchange. And a guy came in to rob him, and he had the bulletproof glass. And so he was pointing a gun at the guy, and I don't know I can't remember the part of the story if they gave him money or not, but they shot him through the glass. And the bullet penetrated the glass, hit him right in the middle of the forehead. But because the glass retarded the energy, when the bullet hit him in the forehead, it lodged in his skull. And he had a concussion, but he was, it was fine. Other than it got a hole in his head they had to fix. And this is what I think. The guy's intent was to kill him and shoot him. And he was allowed to do that. His free will to try and kill him, he did it. But the physics of the universe are in between all of that, and the bullet stopped. Now, whether or not it had help from, angels or whatnot, I don't know. But that's my point, is that these guys are going to lose the war, and they're going to seek to destroy everything. Like, if I can't have it, nobody can have it type thing. but that'll be prevented. Now, how far to get to that? I mean, is that something that's going to happen 100 years from now? And this is just a blip? Are we in the middle of it? I don't know, but that's my hope, and I take that and put it in a microscopically to individuals too. I say, like, just because someone's out to get you doesn't mean they actually will. They can do things to you to nail you, but the physics of the universe can be in the middle of that, so that their intent is done. You know, the bullet has left the gun, but the physics of the universe are in between, and that's where God intervenes through his creation, let's say, whether it be through an angel or whether it be through bulletproof glass. And so that's where my hope is that no matter how bad things get, there's a force of mercy in there. Now, go ahead and bring up all examples of people around the world, kids and all that getting attacked, and you hear probably been in prison in a house in a basement for 5 to 10 years or something. I got nothing to say. I got no answer for that. I know that God will recompense all who have been harmed in this scenario, and in those days, in my heart of hearts, I know that nobody will complain about what they've went through based on where they're at now in this recompense. I mean, I understand that. It doesn't help at the moment, and I'm not going to come up with any kind of words of cold comfort for those who are stuck in this, but it's like I've seen the end, and it all works out. Now, if we could just get to that end, like now, it's like every day I get up, I pray, let today be the day, Lord, where the skies open, roll out like roll away like scrolls, and there comes the Son of Man to make all things right. And I've had a vision. I don't know if it's a vision to me. It was quite startling, and I did a YouTube about it. It's out there if you can go through in fact, I just got a copyright claim on that because I played a bit of a song in that. So at least the copyright guys are watching that, watched it. So I'd recommend people maybe want to listen to that, just see how it might sit with them. And that as things get worse, things get better. Now, I want to say another thing is that when you get into some of the fundamentalists talk about when they get all excited when all these bad things are happening to people because that means Jesus is coming. I don't want to sound like that because it's terrible that these things are happening to people, and we all should do what we can as we go through our lives to help prevent that. But this is what I'm saying. I just hope that all things are in measure. So I just kind of blinked there. As we go forward next year, January 5th will be the 17th year anniversary of Feet to the Fire Radio. I started in January 5th, 2003, when Art Bell left the air at the end of 2002, and George Norrie was taking over the reins, who I don't particularly like his style or how he does things. And I thought, well, if he can do it, I can. So I think he's kind of won in the ratings and monetary lane, but I've been doing this now for starting our 18th year. If you go back to the earlier shows, and again, if you, I mentioned that if you go to feettothefireradio.com and then you click on the link to go to the old website, there is a link that takes you to a Google Drive that has all the shows up until this year. I think I might even have put up this year, and I was looking through them and putting them up there. They're all for download. Now, they don't mention what it is. So if you go to that website, you can use some of the pages that explain where the shows are. But they're all up there. And if I ever get time, I will do it a little more neater. But back in the early days, it was a 4-hour show. Started out 2 hours, went to 3, and went to 4. And we did it like a coast-to-coast thing. Well, I should say I did it. I had guests. I had a main guest for 2 hours. Had reoccurring guest. Dr. Ree Louise was on many times doing her soul healer parts. All that stuff is there. A lot of it's good stuff. I've talked to many people throughout the years who have now passed away. Ian Lungold on the Mayan calendar, and I just posted a link to a Christmas show we did with Glenn Kimball, ancientmanuscripts.com, which I noticed isn't working anymore. He found a lot of ancient manuscripts, and unfortunately, apparently, that stuff is now by the wayside. But there's a lot of people up there who are now passed away. Jim Mars. I'm trying to think of others. There's some rare interviews with people like Sorcerer Fowl, who they only did a couple interviews. One of them being myself back in the day. David Booth and all the guys from back then. And I also went out looking for a lot of people who were unknowns that had good things to talk about. So a lot of that's all up there, all free to take. Probably would recommend you download that stuff when you can, while it's there, because who knows what the future holds. So I want to kind of mention that the old website was feet2fire.com, but if you go to feet2fireradio.com, the links go to it. Feet to Fire Radio is a lot easier to recommend, even though it's a longer URL. And you can download them and listen to them at your leisure. There's only like 17 years worth. You got plenty of time, right? But I think at that point, I wish all Merry Christmas. Can we get Molly to wish a Merry Christmas to everybody? Come, Molly, come on, bark.
What do you want?
Should nothing do it?
What? What do you want?
Yeah, that picture that I have was actually from last Christmas, and that was the last year we had Charlie. Oh, there she is. It's a Jack Russell rat terrier mix.
Jack Rat.
Yeah, Jack Rat. And Charlie was a poodle, Jack Russell.
Jackapoo.
And so that picture was last year's Christmas with both of them. And I just picked that when I was doing this. So I want to wish you all Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, God bless. And we will see you next time. Next year, I guess.
Feet to Fire is a production of IPS Media Works on the OnSync Radio network of stations.